Um, our next speaker plays two roles tonight. He's our host, but he's also a speaker, which is cool. Dries is a researcher and a designer. He leads the research efforts at a local creative design agency called Studio Dott, which is fantastic. Great local talent. He also made an IoT Ideation Kit, so he also has a card deck that I believe is pretty much compatible with what Alexandra did as well, with the note cards that were mentioned before. And Dries really explores in his research how design processes change when physical and digital products kind of start merging, as we see all the time in IoT. And as an area, there's not been a lot of research in that space, so it's really exciting to watch that all come together. Please welcome back on the stage, Dries.
Yeah, I've got the tracking device. Okay, good. I have to put on my different hat and play the speaker now. Yeah, the slides are on. Yeah, it's just a black slide. Okay, I would like to share some thoughts about my ongoing research, which is a research project which I run inside of Studio Dott together with the universities of Leuven and Antwerp. And in the topic of the research project is all about the ideation of what I like to call hybrid product service systems. And basically, as Peter introduced, this comes down to figuring out how the design process from within a company context, in a design agency context, changes as physical and digital stuff gets merged together. I would like to at least share two major shifts in the way that design process is evolving. And I would like to conclude eventually with a direction which I would see a possible solution to those challenges. So I do my research at the company Studio Dott. We are a medium-sized or one of the larger-sized for Belgium design agencies. We have a background in physical product development, so come from an industrial design point of view, physical stuff. But over the years, the agency or the company has evolved towards integrating physical, digital environments, more or less. So that makes that the company is constituted of different entities. So we have products, places, experience, digital, and research, and this all somehow comes together as being one company. As Peter introduced, I primarily active in the research part, which tries to feed to all these different areas. So when it comes to these challenges of the merger of digital and physical, which I thought was nicely represented by this black and white wool being knit together. The first thing is that what it says itself. We're throwing together non-digital stuff together with digital stuff. And although that we might sometimes consider it to be not that different, it's the design process behind it, I mean, it actually is quite different. For instance, when you have a light switch, it's a physical thing, you touch it, it has a materiality to it. A digital thing is sometimes, it's usually experienced through a screen. And we're trying to move this together somehow. To give you an example of how that works, or the way that we approach it at Studio Dott and the research project that we do, is last year we built this phone booth looking thing, which was an exploration towards trying to figure out how urban participation is changing within a city or an urban environment. So that means usually, or the current tendency or the current trend in urban participation is that everyone is moving towards a digital participation. So you get this move from doing local discussion groups with citizens to online platforms where topics are discussed as being an online forum. Now this has quite a substantial impact on the way that participation is done. So this is this move from a very physical real live meeting to a very digital platform. And we try to bring that back to the physical somehow with this prototype. So what you see here is well, it's basically a phone booth, which we built together with some partners. We deliberately chose to not include any screens here. We deliberately wanted to make it look as being something physical, mostly physical. It only has one big push button with an LED ring to communicate the status. And basically what a passerby would do, or what a citizen would do, is walk up to this thing, pick up the phone, the handset, and he or she would get asked a question about an urban development or something going on in the city. I won't go into too much detail about the case. But what we tried to explore here was this changing shift in digital and physical. We saw this tendency of participation projects moving towards the digital, so let's try to reintroduce very deliberately something physical. Of course, in the invisible part of it is that this thing was fully internet connected. So we had this back end where we could track all the sessions that were made, where we could see if the thing was still alive. And we could also go a bit further in the data and like actually look at the replies of people. So we would have sets of questions. We could run speech-to-text analysis on this. And we could try to derive, like, in a digital way, something about the statements that were being made in the physical. So that was like for us a nice project to explore how is this relationship between moving from digital to physical actually happening. A second major change in the merge of digital and physical from the design process point of view is that we're encountering this opportunity space which we're not really certain about, and we're trying to figure out how should we go about with this. And you see a lot of companies trying to figure out how it can be used, is the idea of flexible system boundaries. So this comes down to you can make one hardware device. I'm again using the light switch as an example here. The hardware device, it has a certain aesthetic, it has certain design choices that were made, it has a certain materiality, it has a color, for instance. You can't really change the way that it looks without making a total new thing. But the interesting thing is from the software side, or the digital side maybe, is that you can start assigning different functions to that one switch. So you could imagine that as you buy this product, for instance, I buy this product to switch on my light. Okay, that's fair enough. But over time, the functionality of the light switch might change to become, I switch on my light and a text message is sent. Thanks for moving that out. And a text message is sent to a family member because I've gotten older and people just want to make sure that I'm home, that I've switched on the light. That could be an example case. So that's an interesting kind of radical change in the way that we have to think about the design and development of products. Is because you have this opportunity space which is not limited by the product or the value proposition which you might have launched the product with. To give an example from one of the projects that we've been doing at Studio Dott is the Kaito Grid project or product. This is a skipping rope, or at least it might appear like that in the first place. But a skipping rope is very deliberately made in a way that you can take out all of the electronics, all of the intelligence, which is in that little thing that the person is holding. And basically that little product can be used as a step counter, but once it's clicked or once it's put into the skipping rope holder, it becomes a skipping rope counter. So you can imagine that this can become a kind of like personal fitness platform in which you can start off by, okay, we make skipping ropes, but we already know beforehand that in maybe 2-3 years' time we will introduce other products using the same platform, which have totally different functionalities, but because we can change the way that our product works, We can track different data types. We can track hand grips, or we can trap like these pull thingies, whatever they might be called. So that's the flexible system boundaries. So you have one hardware thing which can over time evolve into becoming something else. So okay, I think those were the two like major challenges or major opportunities. Then the question is, of course, what can you do to think about that? What can you do to ideate upon that, being the topic of tonight? What I believe is one of the critical things that is needed is that we need to look for lightweight design tools. And I think we've already seen some of the design tools passing in the overview that Albrecht provided. But there are a couple of more things out there. What I mean by lightweight is that when you step into, for instance, an IoT startup, and you come in and say, okay, we're going to do a human-centered design process, and we're going to figure out how your product can become more appealing to end users, and we're going to do that through this process. And you propose a kind of like process, but the reaction that you often hear at that point is, okay, but this is quite an elaborate process. We need to go more agile, like very much like the diagram that Alex also showed. Is it an agile or is it double diamond? And you start to talk about these heavy processes, which don't really match with the way that these smaller initiatives of smaller companies think. So thinking about lightweight design tools for IoT, it's something that I would see as one of the current results of my ongoing research, which is also the motivation why Simone, who is also in the room here, and myself, together with Riccardo Brito, set up Ideas of Things, where we try to collect a couple of those tools. I actually added your loaded dice today, Albrecht, to that list, just in time. So we're trying to build this collection of design tools which makes sense in a different context than the process-heavy context. The thing that I have been working on together with my colleagues at Studio Dott is the Ideation Tool Kit. It has been mentioned a couple of times. Anthony mentioned it as well, so I've also used this in his classes. But this basically comes down to a system mapping tool. What it does is that you get a set of cards which are mostly blank, and you need to fill them in yourself, depending on your own project. And you try to make relationships between objects, person, and environments. So typically, you would try to create maps which looks like this. This is the blank version, of course. I have an example of Alex's goodnight lamp laid out using the cards. So in this case, the product consists of two objects, being two lamps. There are some interactions going on here, which eventually bring two people in relation who are at different, who operate in different environments. So this is a super useful, lightweight, I would like to call it, design tool, because it allows you and the client or the stakeholders that you're working with to really make sense of, this is the project that we're working on, this is the system which actually the whole thing goes through. These are the actors that you need, and these are the interactions that need to be defined. And I think within this tool, what really makes it an IoT ideation toolkit is the interaction card. And I've noticed that a lot of times in the workshops that we've been running, is that by forcing design teams or development teams to make the interaction as explicit as possible, that is often the difficult thing to do, but that is the most valuable thing to do. And we try to support that on this interaction card by having people to say, okay, it's a physical interaction, it's a data-driven interaction, it's a sensor-driven interaction, this is mostly an input or an output, or it can be both. Like, there are no real rules behind this, but it are mostly triggers to ask the right questions. So I would like to conclude my talk by stating that when we're talking about the ideation of IoT, there are a gazillion of tools, there are a gazillion of development tools, there are design tools out there. But what I think that it's often lacking in projects is that things are never made explicit. Like, you really have to sit down and make the system map. It's something that very rarely happens in a real world context. And by using a tool like the IoT Ideation Tool Kit, which I just showed, I at least try to contribute towards being more conscious about the design choices that are being made, and in the end, contributing to the responsible IoT, which ThingsCon is also all about. So, if you want more information on that, I'll be around, of course, for the rest of the day. And I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Questions? Oh. Yes. Yes, now that I've cleaned up. 1, 2, 3.
I was wondering if you also cover the value in your ideation phase. Like if you would put a sensor in a fridge that warns you that you're out of milk, nobody's going to pay for that because it's not solving a real problem. So what I notice in my experience with customers is that they sometimes skip the question of the value and to make it more explicit and jump to technology and try to, let's say, do brainstorming about things, but they forgot the value part. What is your opinion about this?
Hasn't stopped the fridge yet.
That's indeed a wonderful question, and it's totally links into something I'm working on at the moment. I'm currently framing this ideation tool within a larger, it's more like a theoretical model, but the underlying thing in that model is value. So looking at the balance between user value and company value, which are totally different things, but they should be taken into account at the ideation moment. And getting that out of this tool is probably not going to work, but I'm hoping to be able to say, okay, if you want to get an idea of what your potential value, for instance, is over time, these are actions that you at least need to do in your ideation process. And one of the things could be, for instance, make a system map so you can pinpoint technology, or you can underpin technology choices, or you can underpin, okay, we need this technological development because it will bring this kind of end user experience in the end. So you can make this trade-off on a value level. So I think there's a lot in that question that you just put forward. Thank you for that.
So we're here and here, then we'll maybe just take one more somewhere over there.
Really technical question. How do you differ between sensor and data, like in your cards?
That's indeed a nice question. It's been something that's been raised quite a couple of times in the workshops as well. Definitely by people with a technical background. But the way that I try to have the groups do the difference between is that a data source would be coming from an external data source, for instance, weather data, whereas a sensor would be something that is locally measured, like a water level, or that's like how I'm introducing it right now. But it's a very relevant point, which can sometimes cause confusion. Yeah.
Did you add certain cards over time because you noticed in using them that something was missing in it?
I haven't yet, but in the next iteration, we're very much looking into adding pre-printed elements, because what this tool is currently doing a bit too much is working towards one solution, where we might want to try to open up the solution or the opportunity space. So adding pre-printed elements, which could then trigger other thoughts, that's currently something that we're exploring how we should do it. So, yeah.
Otherwise, we'll move on. Just before you come on, I just wanted to quickly thank you, Dries.